They thought it was just a huge grizzly wounded, quiet, strangely still. Two hikers spotted him lying by the creek, black fur soaked, breath faint. He didn't growl, didn't flee, just stared. When the rescue team came, the vet leaned in to check the bear. But what he found hidden beneath that massive chest made his face go pale. It wasn't just what was inside him, or rather under him, that left everyone stunned. Because this isn't only a story of an injured animal. It's about protection, sacrifice, a bond so powerful it will break your heart. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so we can keep bringing you stories like this. Ones that show how deep love runs, even in the wild. The trail was barely marked, one of those forgotten paths near the southern edge of Glacier National Park. Tourists rarely ventured there. Only locals dared after October. But Liam and Casey weren't typical hikers. They were wildlife volunteers trained to monitor remote camera traps, sometimes report illegal hunting signs. Halfway through their weekend loop, they spotted him. At first, they thought it was just a shadow, but closer to the river bend, the figure didn't move. Huge, dark-furred, unmistakably a male grizzly, lying on his side, one paw twitching in snow. Casey grabbed Liam's sleeve. "Don't move." But the bear didn't react. Just shallow breaths, no growl, no shift. Liam raised his binoculars. "Something's wrong." They waited, whispered, debated, then backed away slowly and radioed it in. Ranger station, nearly 2 hours away. With daylight fading, they marked the spot and hurried back. The rescue team reached the scene just after dark. Two rangers and field vet Dr. Haley Mendes. She'd seen wounded bears, gunshots, traps, infection. But something about the way this one lay low to the ground, protective, gave her pause. She approached carefully, tranquilizer dart ready. The bear didn't resist, not even when the needle struck. He groaned, then stilled. What happened next, no one expected. With sedation settling in, the team approached with lights and stretchers. Dr. Mendes knelt to examine his abdomen, then saw blood, not the bear's. Something beneath him. She lifted one massive foreleg and gasped. Tucked against the bear's stomach, a cub, tiny, alive, soaked and trembling. And there was more than one. No one spoke. The forest, wind and snow, fell eerily silent. Dr. Mendes stared at the small body curled beneath the massive bear. The cub wasn't moving much, just trembling, shallow breaths. No visible injury, just cold and weak. Then a soft whimper, a sound like it had been held in too long. The second cub was even smaller, tucked under the bear's chest, coated in fur and mud. Limp, barely responsive. Dr. Mendes reached in, gently lifting the first cub into her arms as the ranger raised the bear's front leg. The big male stayed still, breathing faint but steady. "He's protecting them," she whispered. Liam stepped closer. "You think they're his?" "I don't know," she answered. "Male grizzlies don't guard cubs, not like this." But clearly, he had. Another 10 minutes to fully assess the scene. The cubs, underweight, hypothermic, likely unfed for more than a day. But alive. A miracle. The bear, though, worse off. Older than he looked. Deep scratches on his flank, cracked paw, signs of a fight. But strangest of all, his position. Curled just so, a wall of warmth for the cubs. It had cost him. Gently the cubs were loaded into a heated crate. Then they prepared a stretcher for the male. When the truck finally drove off, under headlamps and falling snow, Liam stood watching the brake lights fade into the trees. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew. That bear hadn't just stumbled on those cubs. He had chosen to stay, chosen to endure. At the Wildlife Center, the night turned into quiet, urgent activity. Vets warmed fluids, assistants dried the cubs with towels, heating pads. One cub began suckling from a syringe. The smaller one remained unmoving. Dr. Mendes leaned close, lips tight. "Come on, baby. Just a little more." The larger cub, swaddled in blankets under heat lamps, had finally taken formula. Tiny paws twitched in sleep. The smaller one, though, still curled tightly as if trying to disappear. Dr. Mendes sat beside her kennel, rubbing gentle circles on her back, whispering words only meant for the brokenhearted. In the next room, the big Grizzly, still unconscious, lay on a reinforced table, wounds cleaned and stitched, but the cracked paw, a deep fracture, was worse than expected. What none of them could yet understand: why this bear had done what no male grizzly normally would. Liam returned in the morning, Casey and wildlife biologist Jordan in tow. Jordan had been tracking grizzly lineages in the region for 3 years through GPS collars and trail cams. Seeing the recovering bear, Jordan went pale. "I know this one," he murmured. He pulled up laptop files, Sector B, images from summer. They same bear, scarred muzzle, distinct fur pattern, always alone. "We tagged him 4 years ago. Locals call him Bramble. Lost a mate in a mudslide. Since then, reclusive. Never aggressive, just wandering." Dr. Mendes frowned. "He had a mate?" Jordan nodded. "And she had cubs when she died." Casey leaned in. "You think these are hers?" "I'd bet everything." They all stared through the glass. Bramble, the lone giant, had reappeared, with 2 starving cubs, hidden beneath him. He hadn't found them by chance. He'd searched for them, and when he found them, cold, alone, too small to survive, he had become their shelter, even if it cost him everything. That night, the smaller cub moved at last. No cry, no whimper. She simply lifted her tiny head, turning toward the glass wall separating her from the next room. Bramble was still unconscious, but the bond remained. The waiting had just begun. The first thing Bramble did when he opened his eyes was try to stand. Not instinct, fear, urgency. His huge limbs twitched, claws scraping weakly at the floor, as if he thought he was still in the woods, still shielding something beneath him. Dr. Mendes rushed in, hands raised. "Easy, boy. You're safe now." It was just a huge, but Bramble wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the glass wall, through it to the other side, to the cubs. One of the wildlife techs, Ava, whispered from the observation room. "He's not trying to leave. He's looking for them." The big bear slumped slightly, eyes wide, flicking between the room's corners. His bandaged paw twitched. Then he let out a sound. Not a roar or growl, but something low, breathy, almost a cough, laced with such sorrow that everyone in the room stopped. Dr. Mendes leaned toward the glass. "He's calling them!" The larger cub heard first, rose slowly from the blanket, and wobbled toward the far side of his kennel, placing small paws against the glass. The smaller followed, weak but awake, alive, drawn to that sound. Center policy forbade contact between cubs and adult males, unless under strict rehabilitation. But this wasn't ordinary behavior. This was something else entirely. By midday, the team decided a supervised enclosure would be prepped. A large naturalistic pen behind the center, cameras, climbing logs, snow, warmth. They didn't know how much time Bramble had left, his lungs weak, body failing, but he had lived for those cubs, and now they were starting to live for him. That evening, beneath soft clouds and falling snow, Bramble was gently wheeled into the outdoor pen. He stood, shaky, towering, regal, sniffing the air. Then he turned, as the kennel doors opened. The cubs burst out, at first hesitation, blinking at open sky. Then they saw him. The larger ran, the smaller stumbled but followed. And when they reached him, no fear, no confusion. They collapsed into him. He curled around them just as he had in the forest, one great arm draped across both tiny bodies. For the first time in days, Bramble closed his eyes, not in pain, but in peace. Inside the observation room, no one spoke. Even Casey, tough as ever, wiped her eyes with a gloved hand. Liam exhaled softly. "He waited. That whole time," he murmured. Dr. Mendes nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "And now, he can rest." But the peace didn't last. For 3 days, Bramble and the cubs remained in the enclosure, a quiet haven behind the center. Each day, the cubs played more, growing bolder, even climbing small log piles. But Bramble never strayed far, always nearby, head lifted, watching them, breathing them in, as if each second was a gift he hadn't believed he'd get. Then on the fourth morning, his breathing changed. Dr. Mendes heard it first, on the observation feed, a low rattle, uneven, with long pauses. She rushed outside, boots crunching frost, and found Bramble lying on his side, struggling. His eyes opened, tired, glassy. The cubs pressed close to his chest, crouching by the fence. She whispered, "Hey, hang in there." By noon, he couldn't stand. His vitals were erratic. Blood work showed signs of kidney failure, stress-induced trauma, likely infection from the old wounds they treated. They had cleaned what they could, stitched what was visible, but something deeper was failing. Jordan paced the hallway. He was holding on for them. Now that they're okay, it's like his body's letting go. Dr. Mendes nodded. It's not just physical, instinct, love. Whatever it was never about survival. It was about finishing something. The staff had to decide, sedate him, start aggressive treatment, prolong the inevitable, or let him remain outside where the cubs still found him warm, familiar. They debated for hours. Then the State Wildlife Commission called. The cubs were cleared for transfer to an approved sanctuary where they'd be cared for until old enough for monitored release. The van would leave at dawn. This was their last night. Dr. Mendes didn't hesitate. She entered the enclosure, slow, careful, sat just feet away from the three of them. Bramble lifted his head, barely. She looked at him like she would a soldier, a guardian, a father. "You did it," she whispered. "They're safe." The cubs stirred in their sleep, curled into his belly fur. The bigger one nuzzled under his leg. The smaller, stronger now, looked up with sleepy eyes and let out a soft, contented huff. Snow began to fall, light, gentle, as if the forest itself were saying goodbye. Later that night, beneath a sky full of stars, Bramble stopped breathing. No sound, no struggle, just stillness. At sunrise, Dr. Mendes found him, curled around the cubs one last time. They were awake, confused, but not crying, as if somehow they already knew. The sanctuary was nestled in a quiet corner of Bitterroot Valley, far from roads and crowds, hidden between ridge lines thick with fir and spruce. A place for second chances. When the cubs arrived, they didn't step out of the travel crate at first. Handlers waited, patient, gentle, door open. The bigger cub moved first, sniffing the air, cautious, then padding forward. He glanced behind him, as if checking for someone no longer there. The smaller cub followed, slower, ears twitching at every sound. They stayed close, never more than a few feet apart. They didn't cry, didn't play, not yet. As if some part of them was still frozen in that moment, they'd left Bramble behind. Dr. Mendes didn't travel with them. She had remained at the center, overseeing Bramble's burial. A simple, dignified resting place at the forest's edge, near where he'd first been found. The team left no marker, only a large, uncut stone, the kind he might have leaned against, watching the cubs. The next day, Dr. Mendes visited the pen, alone, and placed a pine branch at the stone's base. "Not many would have done what you did," she whispered. "Even fewer would have done it, expecting nothing in return." Back at the sanctuary, the cubs needed time. Days passed before they showed curiosity, exploring the edges of the enclosure, climbing stumps, tasting bark from fallen logs. The handlers kept their distance, letting the cubs set the pace. But each evening, just before dusk, both cubs would return to the same corner of the pen, the one facing west, where the sun dipped behind the hills toward the place they'd last seen him. It became a ritual, and the staff noticed. One handler, a quiet woman named Rachel, placed a single round stone in that corner, then another, then a third, a silent tribute. By week's end, a small mound had formed, not a grave, not a monument, just a memory they could touch one evening. Under an orange sky, the smaller cub lay beside the mound, one paw resting gently on top. No cry, no sound, just stillness. And acceptance that night, for the first time they played. Not wildly, not long, but enough to remember what it meant to feel safe, The kind of safety he had given them, not with force, not with strength, but by staying when he could have walked away, and that choice had saved them. Spring came late that year. The snow lingered on the ridges as though the mountain itself wasn't ready to let go. At the sanctuary, the cubs had grown, fur thicker, eyes brighter. They ran now, fast, clumsy, tumbling over each other like children with too much joy in their bones. But always they returned to that corner. The mound still stood, they never added to it, never disturbed it. Sometimes at dusk they lay beside it, quiet, heads resting, waiting as if for something to rise with the stars. No one told them he was gone, but they'd always known. At the Wildlife Center, Dr. Mendes stood at the forest's edge, where bramble had been found. Now green, the woods echoed with birdsong. In the distance, a deer moved through the brush. In her coat pocket, she carried a worn envelope, a letter never mailed, addressed to no one. She read the last lines in silence, then tucked it beneath the same stone she had left weeks ago at his resting place. It read, "You reminded me what mercy looks like. Not in humans, not in heroes, but in silence, in sacrifice, in staying. You didn't roar, you didn't fight, you just stayed. And because of that, they lived. Because of that, we remember you." She stood a moment longer, breath visible in the cold spring air, then turned, walking back to the center. Slow, steady, changed. Back at the sanctuary, the cubs were nearing their final phase of care, a soft release program deep in protected land. Not full wildness, yet, but the next step, a place to grow, to learn the forest rhythm, to begin the life bramble never finished. When the time came, the handlers opened the transport gate. Neither cub hesitated. They stepped out, together, pausing only once to look back, then vanished into the trees. Rachel stood, hand on the gate. "You think they'll remember?" Liam, who had come to say goodbye, answered without hesitation. "They already do." Months passed. Seasons shifted, and somewhere out in those mountains, two young bears wandered the ridgelines. They played, they hunted, they grew. But in the quietest hours just before nightfall, they still paused and looked west, toward the memory of a heavy body curled around them in the snow, and the quiet, unspoken love that had saved their lives. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in the quiet power of love, the kind that needs no words, the kind that sacrifices without applause. Because even in the wild, compassion leaves tracks that never fade.